Okay, hi there. Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the first seminar in our Let's Talk Data Consumer Insight series. So we're super happy to have you all today to kick off this new series. Quickly to introduce myself, my name is Lorraine Rodvold. I'm the Marketing and Events Manager here at NetBase Quid. I want to keep the bulk of the time for our presenters who are the true stars of today's show, but just to do a quick introduction of what this series is all about and a little bit about what you guys can all expect to hear and learn today. As I mentioned, this is the first seminar as part of our larger Let's Talk Data series. Each seminar has a specific theme allocated to it. So today's theme is around developing a framework for corporate strategy. We have a couple great speakers who are going to be speaking to that theme. I'll get back to them in just a moment, but I also wanted to highlight some of the other seminars that we have coming up down the line as well. So as early as next week, actually 1 week from today, April 20th, we have another seminar coming up. It's technically a UK EMEA focused seminar, but of course it's actually very US North America time zone friendly. So if there is anyone interested, it's at 3 p.m. BST, which translates to 10 a.m. Eastern. So we have a couple great speakers for that session as well. It's going to be Sabrina from L'Oreal is going to be speaking on that seminar, as well as from the Social Intelligence Lab. She's a social intelligence and digital intelligence expert, so we're super happy to have them both. If you are interested in signing up for any of these future seminars, if you like what you see today, you can always go to our netbasequid.com website, click on company at the top. It will pull up a drop-down tab and you'll find the Let's Talk Data link to the portal site where you can sign up for some of these future seminars. Again, like I mentioned, we have some great speakers down the road, as well as what we have today. We'll have brands and agencies, Coca-Cola, the Jacksonville Jaguars, McCann France, I should say. We're very excited to have him, as well as Doe Anderson, which is another really cool agency based out of Kentucky. So lots of great speakers coming up and more to come. So stay tuned and we'll have those announcements as they come in. Back to what we have for you today. Today's speakers are Joseph Gudino. He's from Just Media. We also have Lisa Wall, who is our Director of Professional Services from NetBase Quid. They both have wonderful sessions, again, that are around today's theme for the seminar, which is developing a framework for corporate strategy. So Joseph, his presentation is around 5 questions to consider before digital listening. When we were covering what he was going to be talking about today, he had mentioned that he wished, these are some things that he wished someone had told him early in his career, or even, up until present day. So lots of really cool insights from Joseph that you'll hear, and from Lisa, a great follow on to Joseph's presentation. She's going to be going into additional tips, that kind of flow in really nicely around how you can create easy, repeatable reports. A great follow-on to what Joseph's going to be sharing. So I will pass it on to Mike from here to do a little bit of an update, share a couple words, and then he's going to introduce our first speaker, Joseph. So Mike, why don't you take it away?
Great. Thanks, Lorraine. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We got a lot of customers on the line today, and, thought I would just take 2 seconds to just jump through a couple new products that we've introduced lately. If you haven't heard about them or haven't had a chance to see a demo of them, love to show them to you. Contact your account manager if you would like to learn more. NetBase Quid product updates. We've got 2 great products we've introduced in the last few months. Quid Social, it's a contextual consumer conversation clustering to help you discover consumer and market trends across all your data. AI identifies conversation trends and their context. You'll see the image on the left. It color codes all the different conversations and then links them together. The nodes and the links will help you understand the relationships and the interconnectedness of the themes with more efficiency and less effort. Simply click on the clusters and you can actually save a theme for ongoing monitoring and reporting. And if you haven't heard about our NetBase News product, we've added significantly more news coverage through our partnership with LexisNexis News. So there's 3 times more news documents through the premium news sources, including full domain coverage, full text, paywall content, and print media as well. So give you a broader coverage of your brand, both on not just social media, but news as well. So just give you guys a quick update on some of those products. If you haven't had a chance to check those out and you want to see them in action, contact your account managers. Also, there's a lot of new content updates that are available for you, best practices, ebooks, a lot of great blog articles as well from some of the experts at NetBase Quid, everything around, finding conversations around your competitors, emerging consumer trends, campaign strategies, competitive intelligence, et cetera. So feel free to take a look at the resources on our NetBase Quid website and our blogs for lots of great content from the experts here at NetBase Quid to help you guys further your own initiatives. Super excited to kick off this session with Joseph and Lisa today. It's our first in the series, as Lorraine said, and it's really about driving more consumer insights through the data that you have access to and the tools you have access to make your lives easier, more efficient, and more impactful to your business. With that, super happy to introduce Joseph. Joseph has done a number of presentations with us over the years. He's going to talk about his role at Just Media and what he's learned along the way in terms of the social reporting and the kinds of questions he gets asked by his executive team. So Joseph, why don't you take yourself on mute and introduce yourself to the team and take us through your presentation.
Thanks, Mike. I always feel like that's such a good handoff. I always appreciate the intro from you. Gets me all psyched up to get going and chat about this stuff. Hi, everybody. I'm Joseph Godino. And I have a really awesome talk for you today. I think it's going to be really interesting. It really gets to some of the questions that I think are at the heart of digital listening. And like Lorraine said, there are questions that I wish someone had shared with me when I was first beginning my digital listening journey. So without further ado, let's get into it. Quick intro again, very outdated work photo. Obviously, that's not what I look like now, but it is a testament to how long I've been doing these presentations for NetBase. I should probably update this profile photo. But a little bit about me. I am a paid social manager at Just Global, and I'm also a staunch digital listening advocate for the agency, for our clients, for anyone who will listen. I'm very passionate about answering people's questions and helping them to explore more about digital listening. I have about 6+ years working with social media, content, and various communities, but particularly with an emphasis on global B2B technology enterprises. So I think one of the things that really jazzes me up is helping people to understand some of the new and actually kind of fun ways that they can use digital listening to help them achieve their business goals. So that's a little bit about me. But what I want to chat with you about today is sort of how to get started and some of the questions that you're going to need to ask yourself and you're going to need to take yourself through the process of answering to really set yourself up for success. And, I think I'm kind of cheating a little bit here because, obviously each of these questions spawns a variety of other questions. One question is not just one question. It will dovetail into various others. But if you can answer these 5, you will be able to really put your best foot forward when it comes to your digital listening journeys. And I think they're applicable whether you are a analyst that is sort of just getting started, whether you are advocating for this company-wide, whether you are you're at your own company or maybe at a brand, you want to get digital listening services efforts started there. I think these 5 questions really, apply across the board. So without further ado, let's get into the 5 questions. So these are the 5 what I believe to be most informative, toughest, necessary questions that you need to answer in order to put your best foot forward. And they are: who are the stakeholders? How will you prove ROI? When are results expected? How does digital listening connect with sales? And what are you listening for? And I think with these 5 questions, and in this order, if you answer them, they'll really put you in a good spot. So let's dive into the first question. Who are the stakeholders? So this question is really going to define all of your digital listening endeavors. You are, beginning to be more interested in how your audience is speaking about you on social. You have maybe selected an amazing digital listening tool like NetBase, and you are now, beginning the process of, these efforts. Well, you have to, before you set up topics or dashboards, you need to define who is involved in this project, who could potentially benefit from this data. And the reason you need to do that is when you are defining the stakeholders, it gives you a really clear understanding of the reporting outputs that are going to be necessary, and it's going to give you the best understanding of who is going to benefit from this data, meaning where is the greatest need that you can match with these efforts? Is it on a regional level? Is it on a company-wide level? Do you have questions from senior management or from various departmental managers? Who in the company or who in your team would most benefit from this data is one of the most crucial questions that you need to answer, because as you're assembling these various stakeholders, it's going to help to define the type of reports that you do, the type of dashboards that you build, how much time is going to go into each of the reporting outputs. So this is a question that you have to answer from the very beginning, because it also defines a very important question, which is our next one. So in summation, you need to maximize the positive effects of digital listening efforts by including everyone who can benefit from this data. Set yourself up to win by connecting with important people. Is there, a departmental manager, a social manager, someone who can help inform builds or queries, topics, who can give you historical data on past efforts? Understand your audience, who you're reporting to, who the stakeholders are, so you can communicate reports effectively. And also, this leads into how you will prove ROI.
Hey, Joseph, I have a quick question for you. This is great content so far. Do you have a set of questions you ask each stakeholder as part of your discovery process? Do you have a couple questions that are standard across all stakeholders, or how do you approach the conversation? Because obviously everyone has different goals and objectives.
Yeah, I would actually say that it's a much more fluid conversation. And when you bring someone a sort of one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to digital listening, it can be really tough to move that conversation forward, because, quite frankly, you put it best, companies and brands are so different that it can be sort of tough to take the same 5 questions from one group and apply it, as a blanket to everyone. I think it's also a testament to how dynamic tools like NetBase are, because you can really do a lot with them. So you can really leave it up to the customer or the client to craft their own discovery journey.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right. How will you prove ROI? So this can be a question that marketers will sometimes avoid if they don't have a good answer. And I know that there's a lot of marketing activities that the ROI is not directly tied to a sales. It's not directly tied to a number going up or down on a graph. Now, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of discovery, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and there's huge value in answering those questions, particularly for your stakeholders. So if you can decide who your stakeholders are, then you can answer your next question. How will you prove ROI? And I encourage you to not necessarily approach this from a dollars and cents perspective or mindset. You can trap yourself very quickly. That being said, you need to answer this question. And so whether it's a quarterly, yearly, project-based approach, this is a question that you need to answer before you really start digital listening activities and begin committing resources to trying to answer these questions, or to trying to learn more about buyer journeys, or to try and move the needle on learn how to move the needle on customer sentiment. There's a bunch of different ways that you can approach how to get value from these products, but the important part is that you clearly define that and you answer it in your own way that is most applicable to you and your clients, or your company, or your journey, wherever you are. This is a very important question that you need to answer and define up front. So in summation, depending on the stakeholders, this might be a tough question. You might have someone who says, I want this to be a dollars and cents thing. We need to get X amount of sales back. It's going to be tough, but you need to work with them on that. And if possible, come up with your own system to define how these goals are going to be achieved when it comes to your digital listening efforts, because ultimately it's super important to the longevity of this behavior, right? Like time, resources, people's, effort goes into building and analyzing and digesting this data. You need to be able to define how exactly you're getting value from this from the very beginning. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. As our question from Mike uncovered, it's not necessarily the same answer how you define ROI across the board, but coming up with a system that makes sense. So be smart about your goal selection when it comes to questions. That leads us to when are results expected? So now that you have stakeholders and you have a method to define ROI, you're going to want to get into it. You're going to want to start building, and you're going to want to start defining topics and learning more about the audience, and you're going to want to go immediately. And the kind of the truth of the matter is, in my experience, with digital listening, is it's sort of like taking a metal detector to the beach. You can sometimes get really lucky and find something really quickly, but the real metalheads will tell you that you kind of have to be out there mining for a little bit. So this is a really important question that you need to answer, as you're getting started, because if you have very strict reporting schedules, or if you have very strict expectations around when insights or observations are meant to be delivered when it comes to your digital listening reporting or analytics, that's something that's going to play heavily into how much time is going to be needed to perform these activities, and also an expectation around the quality or volume of these insights when you're looking at shorter periods of time. Let's say you have a large consumer-based client, with a global footprint. You can get away with analyzing the data in shorter increments because, quite frankly, there's a higher volume of it, and a lot more could have happened in a shorter period of time because there's a lot more data coming in. If you have a smaller company,
who is very eager, or let's say, if you have a smaller brand who is extremely eager to dive into data, well, you might have to level set a little bit about how long it will take for trends to emerge, because it might take a little bit longer. And so you don't want to, set poor expectations around when results are going to be delivered. So very important question, especially after you've defined who the stakeholders are and, a method for ROI. The next logical question is, well, when can we expect results? And so very important question to define and answer. Be realistic about the time you need for things to happen. Understand the volume of data that you need to find insights. It doesn't, again, not one size fits all approach. That was a great question from Mike. It's ending up being an unexpected theme in the presentation, is not a one size fits all approach. Understand the volume of data that you need to find insights relevant to your topic or your brand. And then allow time for social themes to emerge. I know many of us who operate on a quarterly, mindset think of the end of the quarters as, all right, that's it. The gate has closed. No more, nothing else has happened. But digital listening is much more fluid than that. Think about time periods in terms of seasonality. Think about time periods in terms of yearly, long time periods. And I think that will be the best approach to finding the best themes.
Hey, Joseph, this brings up a really great question, and I know Lisa's going to cover this a little bit in her presentation as we get a little farther through our series this morning. What are your expectations in terms of the frequency of your reporting? I know you're talking about when are results expected. Are you delivering reports in a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly fashion? What you just mentioned, the different allow time for themes to emerge, but what's sort of your typical frequency that your stakeholders are expecting? Maybe you can sort of frame that up for our audience a little bit today.
Absolutely. I think the most common approach is either a bi-weekly, monthly, or quarterly approach, depending on the content in the report. If you have a fresh go-to-market strategy, a new product release, something where you're going to really want to know how the audience is reacting in real time, a much shorter reporting frequency is beneficial, so that you can really capture and optimize on any of the findings. However, if you're approaching the reporting from a overall brand health perspective, or maybe an overall brand health perspective, maybe the effects of an awareness campaign, a much longer reporting cycle is beneficial. Definitely no shorter than monthly. Quarterly is actually probably the best way to go there.
Okay, fantastic. And then do you share these results personally? Do you sit down with your stakeholders and go through them to clarify what your findings are, or how do you distribute these insights in these reports? What's your best practice for our audience?
Absolutely. I would definitely suggest a personalized touch. In my experience, this is still very new technology for a lot of marketers. I'm excited that sometimes I hear this is the first time that they've ever seen, reporting outputs that look like this. And so those types of conversations really lend themselves to a personal touch. I wouldn't recommend just sending over a report, without any context. Definitely, if at minimum, some written notes. But I find that in these conversations, much like answering questions or asking questions in a presentation, you kind of uncover the best little nuggets of information when you're just having a fluid conversation that way.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. So this is a question that I've actually found personally a little bit tough to answer. So that's why I didn't want to shy away from including this in here. It's sort of like the ROI conversation, but a little bit more related to modern technologically savvy companies and the myriad of the variety of tools that they have at their disposal to enable sales. So companies they have tech stacks, right? There's there's CRMs, and there's all these different places where sales, data and sales and can be aggregated, and that data is incredibly useful. And in many ways, it can be siloed from other data sources, right? And so a question that I've gotten, and I think this is a very it's a very good question to ask from a client perspective, or from someone who's new to these types of services, is how does digital listening connect with sales? It's a fair question to ask. It's different than the ROI question, which is how are you getting value back from this tool or engaging in this behavior? This is more about, okay, so we are targeting, for example, account-based marketing. A company could be targeting, a list of companies. It's a fair question to, want to know how the effects of their efforts may connect with digital listening. So do you see, these companies interacting more with you on organic social? Do you see, partnerships flourishing with these companies, which you can track potentially, have entire dashboards just dedicated to how you and your partners, company partners, how the effects of those partnerships are benefiting your brand, not just from a overall awareness perspective, but how exactly you can have these systems connect with your sales enablement teams. So, like the ROI question, this is a difficult it's a difficult question to answer, and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. You're going to have to work very closely with either depending on your situation, internal or external teams to come up with the best solution. And here's some of the things that I've tried in the past that have worked for me. So craft strategies to identify how the results of digital listening data is being affected by real world business outcomes. So, did your company have a huge new client? Like, was there a new merger? Was that, publicized in any way? After the merger, was there an increase in sales activity, right? And maybe track those things together. Leads, pipeline, sales data, right? Try to take advantage of having access to this data, if you do, to potentially track ebbs and flows with user engagement in NetBase. Dive deeply into, and this is probably the most important point, dive deeply into purchase behavior at different stages of the buyer's journey. You have tools within NetBase to be able to create analysis that will dive into post-purchase user behavior as exhibited on social. Incredibly powerful tools that will help you to connect digital listening efforts more closely with sales, pipeline, and lead data, which will be a huge win for stakeholders. In my experience, it's been a rather large question. Finally, after all of that, what are you listening for? And this is what I would answer first. When I was first getting started, this is, define your project. What is your goals in terms of listening strategies? What are your topics? This is a very fun question relatively compared to the others. But once you have answered the rest, this becomes relatively fun and easy to answer. But it's important to, set expectations about what is possible. What are you listening, right? I'll get off the wall questions around, will this tell me how much my closest rival is spending, in their paid ad campaigns globally? Like, no, that's not, you don't have access to that. That's not, That's not what this is about. It's about much more than that. It's about answering questions. It's about learning. It's about finding new ways to meet your audience and to communicate with them more effectively. And finally, be ethical. Not to say that there's anything in NetBase that you can do anything unethical with, but these tools, are strong, and they definitely, are very powerful. So when you're doing, engaging in digital listening activities, be ethical, and that is the best way to go. You can go nowhere up from there. So in summation, we answered 5 vital questions that you need before you get started on your digital listening journey, and they will help you to be successful in your efforts. And as a final parting gift, here they are. And thank you. I had a good time, and I appreciated getting to share my hot take on 5 questions that you need to answer before you get started on your digital listening journey.
Thanks, Joseph. I really appreciate it. I think the audience can really sort of connect with you on sort of where they are in various stages of their journey. I would encourage everyone to put questions for both Joseph and Lisa, and we'll have some time at the end. So if you have specific questions about Joseph, about his presentation, or about what Lisa's about to present, something sparks your interest, put a question in there, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. Because I know everyone's sort of at a different path in their journey, and Joseph's, clearly, gone through a lot and learned sort of on the fly, and he's happy to share his thoughts and his insights with you and best practices. So thanks so much, Joseph. That was awesome.
Thanks,
after
Mike.
that presentation, let me introduce our next speaker, Lisa Wall. She's the Director of our Professional Services at NetBase Quid. And this is great because Lisa's going to take sort of everything that Joseph talked about and now turn it into something a bit more practical that you can use about building assets, creating a single source of truth, and actually delivering the assets that Joseph was just talking about in a more, in a very not automated, but more regular fashion, and build this confidence in the data that you have to meet those initiatives. Lisa, why don't you introduce yourself and take us through your presentation?
Perfect. Hello. Hopefully everybody can see and hear me okay. So I'm here to talk about, like Mike just said, easy ways to create repeatable reports. So I actually head up the reporting team here at NetBase Quid, have been doing that for about 2 years now. And prior to that, actually was a client of NetBase's back way in the day, circa 2010. And so my background is really a mix of market research, consumer insights, both brand and agency side. So really what I hope to impart with you is kind of an accumulation of things from past experience, as well as really tangible ways within NetBase Quid. We can help hopefully make your day-to-day a little bit easier, and hopefully you find at least 1 or 2 nuggets of things that you can bring back into your day-to-day and your workflows. So first, I wanted to talk a little bit about who the reporting team is. So we are a team of 8 people across the globe with experience in several different verticals and industries. And we really pride ourselves on taking that underlying foundation of the best-in-class technology, right, that NetBase Quid has with the AI, with the natural language processing, to ingest and analyze massive quantities of data at scale, but then bring that human touch, bring on that expertise that we bring, the passion that we bring, to ultimately spot trends and bring out stories and tell those stories in a way that gets you to that now what point and that can drive action. So we work with clients in any number of different capacities. Maybe you are new to NetBase Quid and you're still getting onboarded, right? You still are setting up your own internal teams and processes. We can work with clients initially to help get sort of an immediate answer to a question, speed up that time to value, and help as you kind of get set up. We also work with a number of clients on an ongoing basis, so kind of serving as an extension as the team. Maybe they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, or simply it's just their preference to have our team that is really living and breathing this every day, doing reporting for them. And all of this is meant to, again, help you show the value and get the value out of net-based QID that we know you can get and drive buy-in at your organization. So these are some of the different ways in which we work across reporting, some of these fairly standard and expected, right? Brand tracking, crisis management, all the way through, I would say, to some of the more strategic in terms of key opinion leader discovery or research and development, innovation, merger and acquisition to drive corporate strategy. And we work across all of these. I would say, though, regardless of what it is, the question we're trying to answer, what department we're working with, we hear really common pain points. We hear, everyone's doing their own thing. We've got people, internal analysts, we've got external agencies and partners accessing the data. We're not sure, honestly, if people are calculating it or doing it in the same way. So when we see a difference in a number, how do we know that that actually means anything? Or, right, if we have all of these people in and out of the data, how do we know we're calculating it and thinking about it in the same way? And also, when we have, 5 people trying to answer one question, that tells us we're not really consistently sharing out those results. So these are some just really common pain points across companies, big and small, brand and agency, that we hear. And what it really boils down to is these 2 sort of central components that the rest of these kind of tips are based around that I'm going to walk through. Forrester released a study a few years ago talking about why do these types of programs fail? And a couple of those reasons are, right, we're not standardizing the data and methodology, and we're not building a process to consistently share results. And so it comes down to these 2 critical pieces, right? Trust. Am I trusting the data integrity, consistency in the methodology and the analytics, and then impact? Am I telling it in a way that it's going to be heard, that it's going to be persuasive, and that it is going to spark action? And these 2 things work really seamlessly together. So if I trust the data, I'm more likely to take an action on it. If I see a positive impact based on my insight, right, that reinforces my trust. It then feeds into it, and it opens up kind of the window of possibilities of what I can do with data. So how do we think about all of this, right? And how does it come together? I would say there's sort of these 4 key areas. Process, as storytellers, probably not the most exciting to us, but absolutely critical and foundational. And again, establishing trust and integrity. As we move into analytics, we move into the storytelling piece, but it doesn't just end there with sharing it. How are we actually implementing it? How are we actually operationalizing it? So the first thing, kind of my, first sort of best practice or tip, establish a reporting framework. I believe in this so much. When I came to NetBase 2 years ago, this was one of the first things that I did. Audit. What are all of those different questions that are coming at you from different departments that you're asking of yourself, right? Audit those and take a research lens to it. What are the most frequent number of requests looking over time? What are the requests that have the most impact? Catalog them, define them, and share those out, package it up, right? Make it really tangible, almost like a product for people to understand. And this feeds into all of those other things that ladder into the process, right? And I'll talk more specifically about these, but it feeds directly into your intake, to your brief, to those questions actually that Joseph just took us through. It feeds into your analytical structure and how you're approaching it, how you're defining KPIs, how you're establishing the cadence. Is this something I'm going to measure on an ongoing basis? And if your framework is breaking down sort of the key categories of questions or the types of questions, the other layer is the output. And Joseph talked about this too. So important to define, is this high level, give me quick insights email? Is this more an executive summary style, 5 slides, or is this an in-depth research report? Again, helpful to set that context. This is sharing with you an example from specifically on the net-based reporting lens, because this is something we did, again, almost 2 years ago. We have since kind of refreshed it and looked at it, but we did exactly what I just said. So we audited all the different types of questions that we're being asked, and we found that over 90% of them fit within this framework. It has evolved a little bit in this last year, and I'll share with you how. But let's take this example and kind of carry it through of Beyond Meat, right? So from a brand perspective, how are consumers talking about Beyond Meat? How does this compare to competitive share of voice? What products and attributes are driving buzz? How does this compare, right? And really drilling specifically into the brand. If we take a step back and look, okay, let's look at just plant-based as a category. Why are consumers engaging or not within the category? How, if we look back historically, 2, 3, whatever makes sense number of years, how is this trending and what events are shifting the narrative? How does this compare to something like keto or vegan, right? And what products and brands are naturally being brought out? And then the third bucket of trend or issue is, it's taking a much more focused lens on potentially a category, or maybe it's a current event, or it's something that your company, an initiative, but it is very focused, targeted. So in this example, it's how has COVID-19 and the meat shortages and what we're hearing is supply chain issues impacting plant-based consideration. So when we initially did this, we found a lot of the work we did actually sat within category. And we actually, as a fourth sort of bucket, had this audience or segment. Tell me everything you know about, dieters or keto fanatics or whatever it may be. 2020 being 2020, we went back and looked at all of the requests that came through, and we found much more in that third bucket of trend or issue, much more urgent, top line type of questions. And we actually found that audiences or segmenting the data is now almost like a level up or a customization within each of these. So it's not just tell me about the brand or tell me about the category or this issue that's happening, but now tell me those nuances between targets I care about, my competitive targets, aspirational targets, whatever you want to define it as is just being critical to layer onto the analysis. And once you define what that framework is, it's going to look different for every company. Whether you're a brand, whether you're an agency, have a standard set of questions that ladders up to each of those offerings. And it's not to say that, it's going to be out of the box and everything is going to fit neatly with that every single time. But it is a starting point, right? It makes it really turnkey. It drives efficiency, so you're not starting from scratch every time. And it then speeds up your time to insight. It also, we found, makes it really approachable. So if you have somebody that's new to social listening, new to net-based quid, just not even sure the types of things that you can answer, it very clearly, tangibly puts on paper, yes, maybe I should do this, maybe I can't do that, and just gets ideas kind of flowing and that dialogue flowing. And tangible. So we have actual sample reports that correspond to each of these. So it's not just, okay, these are the questions I should be thinking about, but this is actually how it shows up. These are the visuals, this is the data, this is the type of insight I can expect to get from this. And this is, just purely an example. Again, it's going to look different based on your category, kind of your position in the marketplace, your view on the world. But this is just a high-level example of those different kind of buckets of questions that then can feed into the analysis. If you're in net-based quid, it can feed into the widgets of how we're thinking about these things. A few that I might call out here, in terms of looking at brand overview that are unique to net-based quid and you might not be looking at today are brand passion. So not just, volume and sentiment, but actually layering on how passionate is that language behind my brand, behind competitive brands. And what it does is it plots all of those brands on a quadrant, right? And you can easily track that over time to say, who's gaining, who's losing, and use that as a prompt to dive deeper. Timeline comparisons, talked about that a little bit, but going into potentially quite historical data to say what has been happening, what's been shifting that. Top posts and authors, so you can break this down pretty granularly, not just who is talking the most about me or this brand, but who is talking with impact, right? So what's their follower? What are the impressions? Or who's doing it in an engaging way and who's actually driving interaction? Sources being another really interesting example of not just where is conversation happening, but how does that look different? Are they sharing different types of content, links, videos, images? Where is the advocacy happening? Where, as Joseph talked about with the purchase journey, we can break those conversations down to say, we see consideration happening here versus advocacy here, etc. So I won't go through all of these. I just mean to say that, have a clear kind of set of questions that you want to tackle, right? And kind of what's your out-of-the-box solution versus where do you start to get to more custom or advanced analytics? This is a similar breakdown per category. It's a similar approach as brand, but of course your universe is much different. And if I highlight anything here, it's the discovery piece. And I think this sometimes gets overlooked, but use unsupervised clustering, right? So AI studios, Quid networks, depending on your product access, what are the things that I didn't think to look for, right? What are those topics of conversation? How are they connected? How are they changing over time? What is driving engagement versus just buzz, right? So I can start to see what's saturated versus what the white space is, what brands and companies are organically being talked about. And we talked about this, or Joseph actually talked about this. We have a whole catalog of certified assets broken down by industry, broken down by focus areas. You can actually plot and category analysis, purchase funnel, overlay, again, those different steps throughout the journey. We can break things down, again, by specific audience types, which we saw to be really important, especially in the wake of this last year. So just some other things to think about. Okay, so moving more into the process, it's really easy to take kind of, if you have a framework and you have a set of questions, to build that into an intake or a project brief. And we definitely recommend having one. So, we've seen these in all shapes and sizes, Google Sheets, Smart Sheets, Word documents, but have and formalize what that intake looked like. So across departments, across people, you were asking the same consistent set of questions. We've heard the saying garbage in, garbage out, but the flip side of that is the stronger your discovery, the stronger you are uncovering at the beginning what you know and don't know, again, the stronger your insights can be. And so these are sort of four things I think some more important if you have like a partner like us or an agency doing the reporting versus if it's internal to your own company, you might have some of this context, but still helpful, I find, to have this dialogue and ask these questions. So the first is understand the business problem. So often we get the research question and it's off to the races and we have to pause and say, tell me more. Tell me more about what is this driving? What is the bigger business implication? Where are we in this process? How is this going to be actioned? So that I can get to the second area of zeroing in on really what is going to be the most impactful. Are there hypotheses? Is there something we're trying to prove or disprove? What is known already? Is there other research simultaneously happening that is going to tell us these three things, and we want this research to really do this? Having that context really just helps us know our place, be more targeted, and be that much more thoughtful in those insights that we're surfacing and how we're translating that to implications. And certainly there is value, and we know that there is a need sometimes for boiling the ocean work. But this, again, zeroing in and understanding the greater context just helps us be that much more targeted and leads to stronger insights. Aligning on data and methodology, the third area. I'm going to keep coming back to this for the rest of the presentation, because I think this is sort of an assumed, like, okay, we know this one, we don't need to talk about it. And I think it is really critical to establishing that trust and the integrity in the data. Some people that you're working with, right, don't want to see behind the curtain, and that's totally fine. They trust that the experts in there are making those decisions that are best to support the analysis. But at least document it, right? At least align on what those things are and document it. Everything from how you're defining the topics and themes, what sources you're looking at, what types of inclusions and exclusions to the data that you're looking at, to really hone in on that data of impact. And then the fourth key area, again, I think this was one that tends to get overlooked, but understand what is going to resonate with your audience. Who is going to be ingesting it? What do they look at? What do they prefer, right? Like, if you know that your audience hates word clouds, helpful to establish that up front so that they don't just shut down the learnings, right? Because it's not coming to them in a way that that is going to make an impact with them. And so from there, it's really easy to take, okay, this is my framework, this is my intake form, and translate it into an analysis structure. If you are a client of NetBase Quiz, this is something you've seen before. It is what we call a model configuration. It does not just apply to reporting, but it is overall, how are we building your data, right? So topics, depending on what we're interested in, brands and competitors and categories, that's all of the data that we're collecting. But then themes is really, how do we break it down? How do we segment? And it really gets us to those insights. We have a whole suite of certified assets that you can look through to get ideas. But you can also, of course, create infinite quantity of your own custom themes. So your own company values, your own marketing initiatives, and kind of how you view the world. And then these are more, automated in platform ways that the data gets to you. Maybe I want to set up alerts if somebody of influence is talking about my brand, or if I set a certain volume threshold, or different templates that you can set up and have reports actually sent to you on a regular cadence. And we'll talk more about that. So kind of moving in, right? We had the process, we defined our analytic structure, moving into analysis. One of the best practices we recommend before kicking off any sort of ongoing research or even just one-time research is to benchmark. Do some initial retrospective analysis, because as we know, a number in isolation really doesn't mean anything without context to compare it to. So understand and establish what the benchmarks are and document them and socialize them. So every time you are, sending out a report on this issue or this thing that we're looking into, put it in the context of the benchmark so that we understand, is that meaningful change or not, right? Before you kind of set people into panic or celebration mode, kind of what your frame of reference is. And coming back to it, defining and aligning on KPIs. Again, I think a lot of assumptions are made here. But when I say volume, do I mean posts or do I mean mentions? When I say sentiment, do I mean net sentiment? Do I mean pure sentiment? Be transparent about what it is and what is important to your organization. We can certainly make recommendations on what we see and understand as best practices, but every company is going to have their own view and own point of view on it. If there are people that want to see behind the curtain, iterate on it and agree and memorialize it. So coming back to document that. If it is something that is, a one-time analysis, maybe I'll do it again in a year. Make sure that's going into an intake form or some kind of document so that anybody coming back to it next year can easily look and set up those same parameters. If you have a dashboard maybe that you're looking at this, you can put a text-based widget and put all of those things. Best practice, we always do that at the top of our dashboards so that, maybe if you're onboarding somebody new, taking over this report, or simply you're sharing it out, everybody can look at the top and see this is exactly what I'm looking at. Or you will talk about this one at the end. If it's something I know I'm going to be coming back to month after month, quarter after quarter, put it into a playbook, formalize kind of what that looks like. Again, documenting. And the kind of last analytical tip and trick, let the tool do the work for you so that you're not manually recreating things every time. And we see this actually quite frequently. So new customers will come on and they're in the tool looking at things and they're adjusting manually filters. They're adding search terms of what they want to look for. And then they're having to kind of remember the next time they come in, what exactly was I looking at? You can save all of those filters as a theme. If you know that I need to look at this again tomorrow, the next day, you can save it as an analysis. Or again, if I'm doing it on an ongoing basis, I can save it as a dashboard. So it's always there. It lets you come back and you can be sure that you are consistently looking at information every time. Okay, so moving into the storytelling piece of it, I have a lot of different things here. Again, this is just based on, on the lower end, we have some in-platform kind of low effort dashboard templates, custom dashboards, email updates, all the way to more out of platform or high effort. And I think, this is just kind of showing not even all the choices, but some choices. I think if you go through the exercise of creating a reporting framework, you're going to want to pick like max of 3 levels of output, right? That are based on the nature of the ask, how strategic is it, what is it to inform the audience, the stakeholders that it's going to, and of course the urgency behind it to best kind of figure out what output is going to make the most sense. So first, dashboard templates. I would say that if you are new to NetBase Quid or if you're new to social listening, right, this is probably one of the easiest first places I would go. We have a number of different dashboard templates that are organized by use case, by industry. We even have some tagged as like beginner starter packs versus more advanced analytics. And you can easily go in and swap out your topics for the dummy ones we have in there. But it's just a quick way to see how the data is coming to life, right? Once you get your feet underneath you a little bit more, or maybe if you have more experience in this, as you are going through the platform and analyzing in different widgets, best practice, anytime you see something interesting, anytime you see something you like, a finding you want to come back to, just make it best practice to save it to a dashboard and just make that part of your process. You can go back in later to the dashboard and rearrange things, add labels, add comments, adjust how it shows up. Is it a pie chart, a bar graph, right? You can adjust the aesthetics and all of that later, but just make it best practice to go ahead and do that. Of course, you can start from scratch, so you can start with a blank dashboard. And certainly I do this also when I'm storyboarding, right? So I have the question, I haven't gone through the data yet, but maybe I want to storyboard. Here are the types of questions and things I'm going to look for. So both of those approaches definitely work. Once you get it how you like it, right, appearing the way you want it, you can go in and you can customize the refresh settings to update as frequently as every 1 minute. You can export it, send it out. You can schedule email reports if you want this in your inbox on a weekly basis, or you can even schedule live reports, right? So you have a stakeholder that's not an analyst, but that wants to be able to interact and see the learnings. You can schedule that to go out as well. And so maybe, you've gone through all of this work for, one of your categories, but you have 7 others. You can go ahead and use this template that you created that is custom to your business, custom to how you need the data to be broken out, and use it as a template that you have now to create for the rest of your business, and it's consistent. These next few slides, I'm going to just fly through. They are just showcasing more of the custom out-of-tool reporting that we do. So scorecards, something as simple as 1 page. These tend to be more kind of weekly updates or monthly updates, calling out just key points of information. This is following our Beyond Meat example, but it has key metrics, right? What are the key stories, owned and earned? What products or features, attributes are being talked about, and how is that shifting? So we can customize those however it needs to be. And we work with clients in a number of ways of either just setting those up or, continuing to report on them ourselves. More important this last year, I would say, is these short form decks. So no more than 5, maybe 10 slides max. Just answer a question for me and frame it as simply as that. I have a question, I need an answer. We've had a lot of that this last year. We also know and work with clients that just place such an importance on the visuals and the aesthetics. We actually use a tool called PictoChart for these clients to create more stylized reports. And if you haven't used it, you can try it yourselves. There's a free version where you can do infographics, one-pagers. You have to get the paid version in order to start exporting to PowerPoints. But it's really intuitive to use. It's really easy to pull in net-based data or different kind of widgets and visuals, along with some of these just more stylized images to help make these reports a little bit more executive friendly. And then lastly, if 50 plus page slide decks are your thing, we've got you there too. This is an example of the Beyond Meat brand one on the left, and the plant-based category one on the right. They're quite lengthy. They're usually pretty customized, again, following kind of reporting framework, but definitely have these as templates. So, we talked about having the reporting framework, having it feed into the intake, having it feed into your analytical structure, and it also can feed into these sample reports, again, that just spark ideas of how these insights come to life. And the last piece that I want to share with you, kind of bringing it all home, is that it does not stop with telling the story and sharing out the report. We love brainstorming, we love strategizing, focusing on that now what. What am I going to do with it, right? Is it impacting a process? Or, simply maybe it is, sparking a need for more research. Is it teams to understand root cause analysis of customer experience issues? Is it setting up the need for, maybe survey research to go in and quantify some of these things? But taking action on it, of course, critical. And once you have an idea of the landscape, the volume, the sentiment, kind of the key important things, you can set up ongoing monitoring, right? So you can set what alerts matter to you. Again, you can set these up as dashboards to refresh continuously and email so that you are constantly staying ahead of these rapidly changing scenarios. And then this last one, we have definitely seen be very valuable working with clients, is creating a playbook. And I would advise creating a playbook for each of those different use cases or those different things within your framework. So establish what those rules of engagement are. It could vary a little bit. KPIs vary based on, of course, the question that you're trying to answer, but defining upfront what those things are, what we mean, how to collect it, how to calculate it, and even getting into, this starts to expand outside the scope of reporting, but establish governance. So if I'm doing a brand report, what are my sources of truth when it comes to brand topics? What happens if I need to create a new one, right? Like, where do I go? And starting to map all of that into these playbooks is a really great way to make sure, again, that you are having trust in the data, right? Data integrity, consistency, and also sparking thought on, now, how do I bring this home? How do I action it? So that is what I had for you guys today. Hopefully, again, you walked away with a couple of ideas. And if you have more, happy to address any questions.
Great, Lisa. Thank you so much. I want to thank Lisa and Joseph for helping us understand how we can operationalize all these insights that you guys are collecting and apply it to the business problems and the challenges that stakeholders are trying to solve. As you've seen from both Joseph and Lisa, there's a lot of great content that you can deliver to really help you guys think about how to frame your business in the context of not only your consumer, but your market as well. Feel free to throw a few more questions in the chat box. I know know we have a couple minutes left here. Lisa, quick question from Taylor. She wanted to understand a little bit more detail how you define audiences within NetBase, and then maybe you could elaborate on not just defining the audience, but how you would then, apply those audience insights, into, your reporting structure and things like that.
Sure, great question. So audience definition can really vary based on the type of audience that we're going after. We can use bio terms, right? Who has sort of self-identified as these things to pull back in. We use that a lot with, for instance, healthcare and pharma, people identifying as healthcare professionals, for instance. Also keywords, what types of language phrases are they using in their post, right? That identify their parents, drilling into that. And we can combine all of those different approaches from bio terms to keywords, other sort of demographic parameters, and build that into an audience. And so kind of two ways that shows up is we actually build the audience as kind of like you would think of a topic, and then we can kind of pull what are they talking about even outside of just being a parent, which is tremendously helpful for understanding kind of outside the scope of the question. Or we can build it as a theme and overlay it onto any of those other things I talked about in terms of my brand, my category, to really understand the nuances of how they're specifically talking about that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's, as you said, there's a couple different ways that you can do it. You can combine those. And so it gives you a really interesting story to tell around not only who your target audience is, but what else are they talking about besides your brand. So really good insights, really good insights. So Lisa, when you guys are meeting with your stakeholders, what is the process, like similar to what Joseph had? What's the process in terms of sort of sussing out what each of the stakeholders wants? Do you have I think you mentioned you have a standard set of questions that you ask various groups within the client base when you engage with them. Can you take us back to that real quick?
Sure, the intake, yeah. So it depends on the relationship, right? Is it somebody that we have worked with before or not? But we tend to have a kickoff as we engage on any project and go through kind of this discovery and standard set of questions. And sometimes we can skip over things if we've been working together for a while and we have an understanding. But even then, it's always helpful to reiterate on, again, the bigger business problem and hypotheses. And we've even found that this helps spark really great internal dialogue at an organization that perhaps, they weren't informed on previously.
Fantastic. And the folks that that adopt this reporting methodology that you've outlined in your presentation today, what are you seeing in terms of trends within those clients in terms of success of their social listening program and actually measuring the impact of all these initiatives? Can you see a relationship between your process and their success?
Yeah, I think it helps arm them with just more information, more data, even the impact. Like if for instance, if we're working through an insights team at an organization, impact that they are happening, and an ability to collect data on the types of reports that they're doing. And then again, kind of an own internal PR piece for themselves, right? That they can then showcase around the organization. And look, these are the brand teams, these are the different teams that we've impacted and how. And it just gives a place to come back to and spark that questions of, okay, well, what did you do with it? And you can start to put some of that in here. And again, they can kind of use it as their own internal piece.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We have a few minutes left for the last few. Any last questions from our audience? Lorraine, were there any other questions for our audience?
I think actually Joseph has a question.
Joseph, yeah, I have a question. That was an amazing presentation. And I'd love to know more about the reporting methodologies surrounding scoring. I saw a slide that had
a nice like a score on it, and I'd love to know how how you arrive at that and what goes into kind of creating that number.
Sure, not specifically sure which one you saw in terms of a score. I think a couple of ones that are unique to NetBase are, right, that brand passion index one. I think that is one we talked about. Do you remember which score it was, or happy to take it offline as well?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's chat later. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome presentation. I loved it.
Thank you.
Well, that was a great presentation, Lisa. I really appreciate it. And Joseph, thanks for all the effort that you put into this. I want to remind everyone that this is just the first of many. Let me refresh that slide there. This is the first of several Consumer Insight series that we're hosting. Lorraine highlighted these at the beginning of the session today. So you can see this is one of just several as we go through our calendar here. And so please join us for these other presentations. We've got a lot of great speakers covering a lot of diverse topics, all of which are being driven by our customer interests. So topics that you find interesting, that you'd like more information on, please let us know, and we'll add them to the series as well. With that, Lorraine, I think we're a wrap for the day.
Yes, we are good to go. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in today. We look forward to seeing you maybe next week, April 20th, or for one of these other future seminars coming up over the next few months. So thank you all. Have a great afternoon, morning, afternoon, wherever you're based. Bye.